I'm Connor Old, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Controlled Chaos. And today we're going to be looking at a very audio-centric director, a great writer and a great director. Mostly for a writer, he's unfortunately fizzled out, but that doesn't mean he didn't have a great stretch of runs that is worth talking about and talking about why he is considered great. He is none other than Cameron Crowe. Welcome back, guys. We're new to the series what we do every single week is we break down a new filmmaker and we talk about the general idea of what makes them great. We also look at what I consider their best movie, my favorite movie of theirs, and then what I consider an underrated one of theirs. Now, I decided to do Cameron Crowe this week because we always look at directors, and directors are, that's our spotlight. And Cameron Crowe is a great director, but he's not necessarily known maybe for his directing. I think when people think of Cameron Crowe, they think of, of course, great direction. He makes great movies. That takes some great direction. But he's known for his incredible writing and sort of his distinctive writing. He's not necessarily a Tarantino or a Sorkin where his style is so visually prominent and just like you can tell, it's so obvious. And anyone can tell that it's a Sorkin dialogue or Tarantino dialogue. It's pretty obvious. But Cameron Crowe does not have that typical sort of dialogue. When you watch a lot of his movies, you see the through line of it, but it's not necessarily one that jumps out at you. Nonetheless, he still makes incredible dialogue movies. I know next week we're going to be doing Billy Wilder, I believe. So that should be a fun one, and he's sort of an interesting director like that because he's a writer-director. But unlike Billy Wilder, Cameron Crowe didn't have as much of a big impact on movies, but that doesn't mean he didn't have an impact. I'd say from Say Anything, and then even I can include Singles into that, and even you can include Fast Times, but I'm going to say his directing career. So Say Anything all the way up until Almost Famous, and then you could even maybe include Vanilla Sky there. This great run from 89 to 2001, really the 90s genre. He does an incredible job at it, and when I think of 90s movies, I think of Cameron Crowe movies, and that's one thing I want to point out is because if you think about something like Jerry Maguire, it's in 1990 a $50 million Tom Cruise, he's the biggest movie star in the world, led, all you need is his face on a poster and it'll make money. He is huge, right? So you have that, and then so it's a $50 million Tom Cruise star, big star, romantic comedy. It's really strange, the Hollywood landscape is definitely different in the 90s than it is today. Today there's not really any stars. You would still say something like Tom Cruise or The Rock, but I would point out examples like Baywatch did not do very well, and The Rock's in it. Tom Cruise, even something like Jack Reacher Never Turn Back, or recently The Mummy did not very well. So there's not really any of these stars, but really this is sort of a unique blend where $50 million really in today's budget, maybe like $80 million romantic comedies, aside from something like Aloha, which is very Cameron Crowe. He directed that, so he has that name recognition, but he didn't really have a lot of name recognition at the time. So to make a movie like that is really incredible. That's why I think he's maybe not as prevalent as he was back in the day. I think his prime is sort of over and gone, and I'm not too sure if Cameron Crowe is going to come back. But there's two things that sort of why Cameron Crowe has sort of fallen off, and I think that's just because they don't really make his movies anymore, and even when he gets the funding to do that, they don't necessarily do well at the box office. I don't think Aloha did very well at all, and that's why people are a little risky to trust him, because he could have a Jerry Maguire, it's always the what if, but he doesn't, and a lot of his movies actually don't make that much money. Singles didn't make that much money. Almost Famous didn't. Really just his Tom Cruise movies, Jerry Maguire and Vanilla Sky. But also I feel, aside from they don't make his movies anymore, I also feel that just the general idea that, maybe he's out of his prime. He's a 90s director and it's not the 90s anymore. And maybe his style is really awesome for that time period, but it doesn't really hold up today, and he has to adapt or change, and maybe he just can't. And I think that's where the perils come, where I think it's great to have a strong director, because then you can take up modern sort of great scripts that you can read and then develop them that way. But Cameron Crowe, who's a writer-director and only directs stuff he's written, it's hard for him because he has to make up wholly unique stories that are relevant today. And recently with things like Aloha and We Bought a Zoo and then Elizabethtown before that, he's just not really great at doing so, and he's sort of progressively had more time period in between his movies. He's starting to be a little more prolific now, but 2005 was Elizabethtown. That was 4 years between Vanilla Sky, right? It was Vanilla Sky 2001, then 4 years Elizabethtown 2005, and then 2011, 6 years later, is We Bought a Zoo, and then 4 years from that, I believe, is Aloha in 2015. So it's he really likes to take his time, and if the more time he takes, I feel the more he's sort of dwindling. And I think his movies have been successively worse, and in my opinion, which was the peak, which was Jerry Maguire. But let's talk about sort of the positives of Cameron Crowe. I think he's, like I said at the beginning, a very audio director, not necessarily a visual director, but an audio director because of the combination of incredible dialogue and incredible music. He's got great soundtracks for this. This is because if you haven't seen Almost Famous, it's an autobiographical movie, but if you don't know, he was a rock journalist for Rolling Stone at the age of 15, so he's really knowledgeable about music, really loves music, and really sort of weaves that into his movies and makes them a character in his movies, like some of the great directors like a Wes Anderson or Martin Scorsese. You know, he's definitely more of a soundtrack guy than necessarily a score guy, and I think worked because of it, and just the incredible dialogue that I mentioned before, where not only is it just great dialogue and great moments that you think of, it's just incredible structures, how things pay off. Jerry Maguire is like a 5-act movie, maybe 6-act movie. It's sort of unique in that way, where there's a lot of stuff happening, and it's like 2 hours and 20 minutes, but it just blazes by. It's really fast. Something like Almost Famous, the bootleg cut is 2 hours and 45 minutes. So, but even still, it makes it go really fast because he gets you so entranced by the characters and how he constructs the story. So the story, how it works and flows, and the rhythm along with the music really is well done. And I think that's not necessarily the music, but has to do with his music is his incredible ability to edit. I think he's an incredible editor too, just because the way the movies move along, he takes the sort of skeleton, which is the script and the structure, and then adds something like the music onto it to add the sort of rhythm, and then editing the movie in that sort of rhythm that keeps it going, a sort of a constant momentum and flow. I was watching an interview with Martin Scorsese about The Wolf of Wall Street, a little bit off topic, but he was talking about how there's a great scene he wanted to include, but he decided not to put it in because it ruins the momentum of the film. See, if you put in a scene that you really like, but then it ruins the momentum, you're half a step slower from there on, and it doesn't get to that pace. You want everything to move really fast, and I think Wolf of Wall Street does an incredible job of that at like 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it feels really fast. I didn't have to skip forward or anything like that. So little things like that. So the editing, the how he constructs a story, and I think he just has a really good grasp on his materials. Even though his materials sometimes don't hit, like his more recent films, he still has an incredible grasp on the materials and how he wants the stories to flow. Another thing I want to point out is he has incredible characters. You know, something like Penny Lane or Lloyd Dobler, John Cusack, Jerry Maguire, of course. You know, these incredible, interesting characters that he allows the actors to give another dimension to them, but he really creates these three-dimensional characters. That Penny Lane, where she's sort of like this mature person, but she's still 16 years old, and she's sort of a little too mature for her age, and she's trying to teach things to the kid there, and just interesting things like that. And then, so I think just like I said, the writing, right? The characters, the incredible story structure, all that works really well, and I think he does a great job at that. And then, you know, I think just the actors add their own flavor to it, and then those become synonymous. You know, Penny Lane is synonymous with Kate Hudson. Jerry Maguire is synonymous with Tom Cruise. Even you could say Lloyd Dobler is sort of a high school teen romance that can be considered with John Cusack. So I think he really elevates his actors, and if anything, you can tell he's an actor's actor, not necessarily a visual director, like I said before, but an actor's actor that wants to get the great performances out of the actors, and then will cut around sort of the story beats and will sacrifice it for the actors' performances. Okay, now let's move over into what I consider his best movie, Jerry Maguire. Now this was really hard for me because it was choosing between, maybe Say Anything was in the conversation, but for me it was sort of Jerry Maguire and Almost Famous. And really, the way I've been able to distinguish things is personal movies. What makes a Cameron Crowe movie a Cameron Crowe movie? I talk about this all the time. Why I consider Goodfellas the best Martin Scorsese movie, because it's very Martin Scorsese what I think of when I think of him. Or Alfred Hitchcock, I chose Vertigo instead of Psycho because it's more Alfred Hitchcock. It's more of him on the screen. That's a Rear Window or something like that. But this one I'm going slight deviation, but it makes sense because Almost Famous is his most personal movie. It's an autobiographical movie in such, with his mom and sort of a character that inspires him, of a fictional band that was inspired by other bands that, you know, he did. Sort of the general story arc of that was based off his life. But I'm going to go with Jerry Maguire because if you think about it, it's the most Cameron Crowe movie. I'm talking about incredible dialogue. Jerry Maguire has the best. Show me the money. You complete me. You had me at hello. I mean, it's an incredibly quotable movie. It's an incredibly rewatchable movie. And I think if you think about Cameron Crowe, most of the time you think of sort of like romantic comedies that, you know, they're elevated in certain respects. You know, they're not just romantic comedies. Say Anything, who has that odd turn, and, you know, Jerry Maguire's really a sports movie. but in the heart and the core of them, they still are these romantic comedies, romantic movies. And I think Jerry Maguire is more of a romantic movie than Almost Famous, which is a little bit more of a love triangle, sort of muddled area of the 70s. But that's why I say it's the most Cameron Crowe movie. And just I want to talk about what I love about Jerry Maguire is, of course, the quotable lines, of course, the great story, but I'm really making it an incredible mix of genres. Why I think it's his best, because he's got incredible rewatchability, which I mentioned, but you also have, great comedy, you have the romance aspect, you have the drama. You can't have the happy and the good times without the lows. Jerry Maguire hits that low, but then it's awesome to see that rise, right? And then you have just incredible the comedic parts with Jonathan Lipnicki, and the human head weighs 4 pounds and all that funny stuff, and he's so cute, does an incredible job just at being sort of that cute little kid. And then you have the romance aspect, which they really nail with him and Renee Zellweger, which their chemistry is off the charts. You could feel it. You really feel like these guys are a couple, and the sparks are flying between them. You really feel that romance. And then you have the sports aspect with Cuba Gooding Jr. and the funny moments that come with that, and the sort of the stakes that happen with, you're a free agent, so if you get hurt, you're screwed. And then that scene where he catches the ball, and then he just he lays down, people think he's injured. He's like, hold on, let me just soak this in for a moment, because he knows that when he gets up, he's going to be the star, and he owns it. And even when he won his Oscar for this movie, he sort of had that sort of, oh, I'm so excited, I can't believe this is happening, I love the Oscars, sort of continuing on into his character of Rod Tidwell. Really interesting stuff, and great names too: Lloyd Dobler, Rod Tidwell, Jerry Maguire, Penny Lane, which actually I think is an actual name that he meant. Stillwater the band, I think it just makes incredible names. It's also like a 4-quadrant movie. I think this would be recommended to anybody. It's not super vulgar, it's got the sports for maybe your dad and your brother or something like that. So, but then it's got the romance aspect for the ladies, right? And sort of a great comedy that everyone can sort of gather towards. And my dad showed me this movie, and he was definitely a big fan of it because he loves Tom Cruise. And I'm glad he showed it to me, because it's a really great movie, and just one that I would definitely recommend to everyone, because it's just so masterfully crafted in the unique sort of 6-act structure with a great blend of comedy and drama and romance. And it's a sports movie, really, and it's just super heartfelt, and you really feel the sort of care that takes. And really, I want to point out, this is a synonymous sort of great Tom Cruise performance, because this is not the Top Gun Tom Cruise. This is sort of the broken down, sort of humanized Tom Cruise moment. This is not Tom Maverick. He's the best #1 pilot in the world, flying jets and stuff. This is like he's getting fired from his job. He's losing all his clients. He has only one client left because he did this sort of crazy thing, and it's sort of a broken down Cruise, which sometimes is good because he can do the interesting sort of big blockbuster action movies that he's doing today, but today he's lacking the sort of roles that are like Jerry Maguire, which breaks him down, and especially at the movie star at his level, to take a risk on that and sort of break him down to make him more of a human character. That's what I love about Tom Cruise so much. And Jerry Maguire, he knocks it out of the park, being the sports agent, this fast talking sports agent, and the chemistry that he pulls off with Renee Zellweger, and his comedic timing, and just of course, I love the iconic scene with Rod Tidwell, "Show me the money." Just incredibly funny, quotable lines that you've heard these lines before. Maybe you haven't seen the movie, but definitely go check out the movie. It's great. Actually, now I'm going to consider what I consider my favorite, which is Almost Famous. This is actually my favorite just because I'm a big fan of classic rock. I can understand why I think Jerry Maguire is a better movie, just the way it's structured and how it's so tight and how it moves. But I think Almost Famous is just a little more favorite for me because I love the on the road style. I love the classic rock 70s. I just love that time period. I'm really a fan of the 70s sort of time period, and sort of on the road with these guys and how that works. I like watching music documentaries because of that, because of just on the road and talking with the guys and hanging out. And then you have the love triangles and sort of the no responsibilities, but then you also have the responsibility to, we have to be big. You have to make quick decisions. Should I stay with the Jimmy Fallon manager, or should I not? Just interesting things like that. And of course, this is an autobiographical movie, and you feel it. I was listening to the Blank Check podcast with Griffin and David, and Griffin makes a great point of, it feels very nostalgic. Even though I wasn't there, it feels nostalgic. It feels like this is what it's like to be at the 70s time. There's other movies that don't capture the 70s. It feels like a fake version of the 70s. the 70s, but this really feels like a really true and authentic, genuine period, and adds sort of a heart to what people consider a heartless period, in the sense of like, oh, you just go around, you sleep with everyone, and you do drugs, and it's crazy and it's fun, but there's not a lot of substance to that. I think Cameron Crowe adds a sort of romantic comedy that he's learned in Jerry Maguire, and adds that, and adds the substance, and sort of adds a real character in the journalist, which the guy, and I'm forgetting his name unfortunately, but you know, it really adds a sort of really good heart and sort of solid foundation to sort of the crazy, wacky characters, and that's why the Rockers are good as side supporting characters, and why you have that sort of central foundation of Penny Lane and the guy and their romance. And yeah, I just like I said, it's a really great movie. You could consider this his best because it's just a really fun movie. But I would recommend Jerry Maguire to everybody. I'm not necessarily would recommend Almost Famous to everybody, but it's definitely a really fun time. And it's a soft R, but it really isn't an R. It's just a really cool movie. And then I just want to point out here, underrated, which is Singles. This is just a general recommendation because no one's really heard of Singles. You only really watch it if you're looking at Cameron Crowe's filmography. This is actually a movie that inspired Friends, and it really has sort of like this vignette sort of areas, and I can tell where some storylines don't really go anywhere and they're sort of stupid until the end, but some of them are really good, and sort of these nuggets of storylines, little things that they do, and you know, Bridget Fonda and Kira Sedgwick, they do an incredible job, and Matt Dillon as a sort of the stoner sort of guy. And really, it's a really great period piece, because I could actually argue this is the best 90s movie, because it captures Seattle, the grunge rock period, in that sort of time that it was big. You know, guys like Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, you know, all these bands that they're actually in the film, and Tim Burton's in the film, and Paul Giamatti, weird cameos, but they've definitely sort of captured these guys and captured this period and sort of this time capsule, like how I love 70s New York, for example, because it's such an interesting time capsule, and even to 80s New York. I think this is an interesting time capsule that I haven't seen ever before, which is like a 90s or very 90s grunge time period-esque, and watching it modern today, if you didn't grow up in that time, it feels the same way you would watch a 70s cop movie, or you'd watch a 50s sort of Grease, you know, I mean, it feels like this sort of interesting time period encapsulated in time. I think it's worth just the watch just for that. Anyways, guys, for all those reasons, that's why Cameron Crowe is a master of controlled chaos. If you like the video, make sure you like the video. Comment below. Let me know what your favorite Cameron Crowe movie is. Maybe who should I do next? You know, the series is almost coming to an end now. I'm definitely going to transition into Old Oster Countdown, you know, in October. I might take a break, but I still got a lot in the can so far. We'll see, because I'll be going on vacation, so I have to get a couple in a row. But so, you know, that should be fun. Anyways, guys, I'm Connor Old, and until next time, stay tuned.